Hey everybody, welcome to IA Command. It's me, TV Boy, your host, and today we are going to be talking about Season 5. It is crazy that we are already past through the Season 5. We're at the end of the Season 5 playtest period, and it's been a crazy season, and we're going to talk about it today in this video. And guys, I apologize. I know there's been a bit of a dearth of content that just kind of happens during the playtest period. There's not any tournaments happening. And I've just been super busy at work and with the new baby, of course, and mother-in-law is also visiting to help take care, but that means there's not a lot of free time that I can just kind of sit down and record. But they're on a walk, and I've got some limited time here. It's the end of the day at work, and I've done a lot of stuff at work already, so I'm just going to try and talk really quickly and, you know, summarize an entire 2 or 3 months of playtesting on an entire season as quickly as I can, because I want to kind of share with you guys what's been going on with Season 5 and how the cards have been doing. And I know a lot of you watch this channel and don't get to play a lot of games or aren't super active, but are interested in the game, interested in what IACP is doing. So let's jump in. If you're wondering, playing in the background, I've got some capture footage. This is me doing data entry, going through the game log. So what we do is everyone who's been playtesting the season so far, they send in their recorded game logs through Vassal, and then I go through all of them and painstakingly enter all the data, and then that way we have good numbers. And then so that's what you're watching in the background there. You know, I just thought it would be good to have playing in. There's some season 5 gameplay happening in the background. Anyway, so I think what we're gonna do here is I'm just going to go through the cards. I'm going to talk about how they've done, how they've played in Season 5, you know, because I watch all of these playtest games. And then the changes that have been made to the cards. And we actually, I believe, by the time this video goes up, the Season 5 community vote will actually be open. So you can go, and anybody can go and vote if you're interested enough in Imperial Assault to have found the project and want to, you know, make your voice heard. 70% approval for each card is going to get that card added to the project permanently. And yeah, so it's a good way to kind of make your voice heard, be part of the community. The community gets the final say on which of these cards get added to the project for everyone to play. And if a card doesn't get approved, that doesn't mean it's gone permanently. It just means we'll probably go back and retweak it, retool it, probably do an overhaul, like a full overhaul that we can't just do in one season, in half a season, to get it right for the next time, which we have done before. So anyway, and by the way, guys, I am if you didn't know, I am a steering committee member for the IACP. So that's going to be coming from, that's where my perspective is going to be coming from. I'm not going to be talking about stats for this one, even though we do have pretty much full stats for all the figures and cards, just because it's going to take so much time to do that, and I just kind of want to blow through these real quick, keep this video about maybe 20 minutes. I don't have a ton of time, and yeah. Alright, so double check, make sure we are recording. We are good to go. Let's start off with the Season 5 mercenary cards. I do think that mercenaries were definitely the most interesting faction in Season 5, so let's start with them. And let's start with an easy one. Let's start with the Wampa. So Wampa in Season 5 had a cost reduced down to 6, got reach, and I think that was it. And oh, and it's still speed 3. So Wampa was super popular in the very beginning of Season 5. A lot of people were playing double Wampa. Wampa creatures, Wampa. We even had some Wampa in Empire without Beast Tamer. They were using Lion Ambush, and a lot of people really liked playing them. The problem was their win rate was garbage, and I said I wouldn't talk about stats, but the win rate's really important for the Wampas because it was in the like 20s, which is really not good for figures that we're trying to make, you know, competitively viable. We want to see 40s to 50s, 50% win rate, and so in 5.1, the first update, we gave them, we added to their hunger ability that they gain their choice of a defensive power token whenever they use hunger. And then we also swapped out the bleed on the surge for bleed and stun for a surge for weaken and stun, to kind of give them a little bit more you know, to let them sabotage another figure's attack power by hitting them, which it gives them a little more durability. And so far, we have been seeing them do really well. So Wampas, of course, brawlers. They have creatures and brawlers have really good cards, especially the season 5 cards. We saw a lot of pummels, dying lunges. Beast Tamer's obviously amazing with them. Even though they only get 3 movement points from Beast Tamer, they're getting 3 movement points from Hunger as well. So allowing them to move 6 with efficient travel to ignore difficult movement costs. And that's without even spending an action. So they can move 6 and then use their 2 actions to pummel, or they can move 6 and then take a regular move action for 3. So yeah, Wampas are in a really good spot right now, and I think Wampas are going to... I think we're going to see creatures and being in a really good spot moving forward. So moving on to the next one, let's talk about... Yeah, so many of these changed so much. It's funny, Wampa's changed the least. Let's talk about Dr. Aphra. So, Dr. Aphra, pet card of mine. Really excited to see it do well. And it did do well. It did do very well. In fact, it did too well. And what we actually saw was Dr. Aphra... 2 stats with her was either you brought Dr. Aphra with 000 and BT1, or you brought her without them. If you brought her with them, you didn't do too well. If you brought her without them, you did way too well. And so what we realized was that the Dubious Counterparts ability was just not good enough to overcome the burden of having 000 on your list. And the Excavation ability was just way too strong, and we saw a lot of really interesting uses with that ability. Of course, a reminder that Excavation was a special action. You get to choose a command card that costs 1 or less in either player's discard pile, except take initiative, and then you get to replay it for that turn. And oh man, just the ability to play a card and then activate Aphra to replay that card in the same turn was devastating. We saw people getting intel leak types. The big one we saw was Hostile Negotiation, and if you don't remember, that's a card from, I think, Tyrants of the Lothal. That was like 1 point. You discard a card at random, and your opponent discards 2 cards at random. So imagine playing that, and then playing it again in the same turn with Excavation, and you lose... I mean, you lost 3 cards from your hand, and your opponent basically discards 4 cards in one go. It was brutal. And, a lot of other things. Planning... black market prices twice to get a bunch of card draw in one turn and victory points. So what we ended up doing in 5.1, and we saw her in a lot of lists, and she was just solid value. 5.1, we originally we were gonna just add a discard cost, but we realized that it was really the double tap of playing the same card twice. It was really devastating, so we moved it to be a start of round ability, and it doesn't cost an action anymore. But what happened was we kept the discard cost too, and I think that was a step too far. So we found that a lot of players weren't using her for her Excavation anymore. We also updated Dubious Counterparts, so now you can actually bring the 2 droids for free. You didn't have to like bring a Jawa or anything like that. You still had to pay their deployment costs, of course. But also, if you use their special action, they would get a free action on top of that. So really nice for 000 to be able to focus himself basically for a free action and then attack. So because of that, and then what we saw was people, because the Excavation was no longer very useful, we just saw people bringing her as a 4-point like attacker, because her attack was really good because we gave her a surge for accuracy as well, so she just had really good stats, and we weren't seeing people were like maybe using the Excavation now and then, but that's not really what we wanted. So anyway, in 5.2, the final update, we removed the discard cost from Excavation, so that way it would be feel so punishing to use it. And then we also reduced the Pierce 2 down to Pierce 1, just because we got a lot of comments from people saying that she felt like she hit too hard for a 4-point figure if you compared her to like Hera and Greedo, especially for a support figure. So yeah, that's Aphra. Moving on, because I realize now we're at almost over 9 minutes. We gotta get through these. Oh, and also Windfall ended up being a good card, but not a broken card. But we did end up reducing the VP gain from... We got rid of the +1 modifier just because people were complaining that Aphra was, you know, just being run in lists for her attack and not for all of her cool abilities, so we didn't want that. Alright, so that was Dr. Aphra. Let's move on to HK47. So HK47 being played in a lot of lists alongside another card from Season 5, which was the new Under Duress, which got... Well, we'll talk about that. We can talk about them together anyway. Under Duress went down to 1 point and added a new ability that you could exhaust it to basically force the opponent to choose one of the modes for strain that you wanted. And that played really well with HK47's abilities, who could make the opponent choose between taking +2 damage from his attack or getting a strain and a bleed. So a lot of people were actually choosing the +2 damage when they were faced with a strain and a bleed on top of Under Duress. And so he was just hitting like a truck from a very long range. And he was really putting the unnerfed Assassinate to good use. Also his cards, his unique command card's really great. Free attack, and you just have, with a blue, you know, with that +2 damage if somebody doesn't want to take the strain twice. So we ended up reducing the choice from +2 and bleed and strain down to +1 and bleed. But we also updated Mockery, because that was the other thing, is if you took the bleed, you would be taking guaranteed strain from that. So we updated Mockery. People were complaining that it just wasn't... It was very frustrating to always have a lose-lose choice with their bleeding figures, where they would either take strain from the bleed or take strain from Mockery. So we made it a more active ability where to still support bleed, HK47 can discard a bleed from a figure in his line of sight to deal 2 strain to that figure. Now, unfortunately, what happened was people noticed that, well, weirdly, people said, you know, why would I ever take 2 strain over +1 damage? Like, 2 strain, in a lot of people's minds, is just always going to be better than taking 1 damage, because it's usually going to be 2 damage for 2 strain. So a lot of complaints that, you know, it still wasn't balanced. So after a lot of kind of discussion, trying to figure out how to make that work, we realized that the simplest way to fix it was to just decouple Query and Mockery. So Query still +1 damage versus a bleed. Pretty balanced choice on the face of it, even if the HK player has brought Under Duress. Because that bleed doesn't kick in and deal strain immediately, it takes a while and the opponent has a chance to deal with it, versus the +1 damage, which happens right away, but which is a little more manageable. So we just changed Mockery now to, without dealing anything with bleed, HK can just choose a figure in his line of sight and deal 1 strain to it, and that's once per round during his activation. So that means he's going to still play really well with Under Duress. It's a nice flexible ability. It's very simple, and yeah, I think HK47, I'm really glad I think he's survived well through the testing process. I was worried he was going to get nerfed into the ground, and I think he came out a much more balanced but still very powerful and fun figure. And I think, and obviously still has Conclusion, which just takes away a dodge. I think he's going to be a great figure for players that don't like dealing with variants, and also for players that want to focus on building around strain in Mercenaries. So, final one. Actually, let's talk about, and this is definitely not the final one, let's talk about Under Duress. So, Under Duress was very powerful. It was reduced from 2 points to 1, and like I mentioned, we added the Exhaust ability. And it was just basically exhaust to mill 2 cards from the opponent's deck every round, which is just super powerful. It was not difficult to deal strain, and the ability itself was quite powerful as well. I think I personally underestimated the mill 2 versus 1 damage. I just always thought like people will always take the 1 damage, but yeah, it ended up being quite strong. So in 5.1, we went with actually community members. I forget who it was, but it's in the 5.1 announcement article. Suggested, why don't we just take, because we felt like it came down to either we have to make it 2 points with that ability or with some extra ability, or make it 1 point with just the old text. But this way we got to keep it at 1 point and give it a little bit of a boost instead of just the old vanilla text. And so basically what we did is, instead of exhaust, you'd have to deplete it to use that bonus ability. So nice. It's nice because it makes you go for the damage instead of the just always mill. Because if you use that to mill, you deplete it, you don't have Under Duress anymore. You're only going to mill 1 card. So not really great to deplete your Under Duress for that. Also really great because it helps solve the problem of people who have like an opponent with figures in their list that cost strain to use abilities, which sucks against Under Duress, against the old one. But with the new one, you know, if you're using Giala's Force Throw round 1, and your opponent's like gonna deplete Under Duress just to discard a card, you know, you're pretty happy if they do that round 1. That means you don't have to deal with Under Duress for the rest of the game. So that really helped deal with a lot of the problems, and I think Under Duress is going to be in a good spot now for Strainless. Okay, the final new figure text is going to be the Shapeshifter, the Claudite. So Claudite, Elite Claudite especially, was doing really well. We were seeing some double Claudite, but mostly single Claudite lists. And yeah, that Spy trait, Spy and Hunter trait is such a strong combination, allowing you to, you know, not have to spread out your traits in your list and just have the best offensive cards along with the best control cards. It was really powerful. The update to the Senator made it super consistent with the power tokens, and then the Scout had a lot of flexibility, and then the Soldier ended up being very powerful for people that wanted to run double Claudites, and basically you could have a Scout and a Soldier as your 2 Claudite range attacking forms with no downside, and not having to like have one be a Senator or be a street rat. So what we did is 5.1, we got rid of the +1 health boost that we had given to the Elite Claudite because we found the Elite Claudite was overperforming in the playtest league, and we also nerfed the Soldier ability quite a bit. Removed like the Focus Surge, made it a double surge for +1 damage, blast 1. Realized we went a little too far with that nerf, and based on the community's reactions, in 5.2 we split that back into a surge for +1 damage and a surge for blast 1. And we also reduced the health of the energy shield because we found 5 health was indeed just a little too much specifically for swarm lists. For like trooper heavy lists, we found that you could really stymie them with that energy shield and probably take out a lot of their attacks, making them wasted on the shield. And so that was not what we wanted. So 4 health is still, you're gonna have to put a pretty decent attack to it to one-shot it. But with 4 health, you can easily take it out with 2 attacks from any figure, really, with no defense. So yeah, that was Claudite. Claudite's doing really good. I think Claudite's going to be like a staple going forward in a lot of scum lists. Just those power tokens from the Senator, and you're guaranteed, I think, you're guaranteed 3 power tokens from the Elite and 2 from the 4-point regular. Are really versatile and really add to the scum strategy of like ginning up and making big powerful attacks with focus. Okay, so then finally we got into the recosts for scum, which was Dengar down to 7 and Zuckuss down to 6. Both of these figures doing quite well in their new points costs. Still really a hard cap on how good they can be because you can't focus them. They autofocus, so focusing them is pointless, and they are 2 dice. So, you know, I think that's going to keep them in check with their new points costs, but both of them doing quite well. So yeah, I think mercenaries are in a good spot. I think we've got a lot of variety for mercenaries between droids, creatures, obviously hunters, and some good support in mercenaries that will give players some nice options outside of just the Rebel care package. All right, moving on, and I think this is going to take a while, but we'll just keep going. Empire. So Empire, let's start off with Captain Taro, who got 2 new abilities in Efficient Travel and Professional, giving him a much needed reroll as well as a way to traverse the difficult terrain and figures. Also a big update to his command card, arguably an even bigger update than his deployment card. Reduced to 1 point start of the round instead of start of his activation, and +1 damage to all friendly troopers within 3 spaces instead of +1 surge. And I think Cavalry Charge is really the big draw to play Taro, and I think the reason he started off a little slow playtesting league, he was doing okay, but he really started to do much better as the playtesting league progressed, and I think people started to really value and understand the value of and a good timing of Cavalry Charge, just a well-played Cavalry Charge, maybe in combination with like Krennic or something like that along those lines. You can just have an explosive play with the troopers list. And moving on, we had the heavy stormtroopers doing surprisingly well, like honestly overperforming compared to what I think a lot of people were predicting from them. Really flexible with that modular ability, great attack, especially control over the results with spray fire. And then yeah, just heavy weapons. Got a lot of support in season 5, and I think heavy weapons in Empire is going to do really well, especially with like general's ranks, which was 1 point reduced from 2 points to 1 point, and we updated the wording. Now interestingly, Derek, another steering committee member, during a random conversation on Slack, found this random rule in the rulebook that says that if a large figure moves X spaces, it cannot change its orientation during that movement. Now that really sucks if you're putting general's ranks on your ATST so that you can move it 2 spaces, because it means it can't pivot, which is really important for large and massive figures. So in 5.2, we ended up having to re-template that card so that now it says if you would gain movement points and it's not your activation, increase the number of movement points you would gain by 2. So actually a slight nerf for the small figures because they don't get that immunity to difficult terrain anymore, but overall better for large figures and massive figures. Like, and we were seeing like dewback riders were taking it, Wampas were taking it. Just a really good card for figures in Empire to give them a little boost to their attack, and like really the movement is the biggest thing, and I think we're seeing a resurgence of the ATDP because of it, and we're going to see the ATSD, which, you know, spoiler, came down to 10 points from 11 with general's ranks and an officer being able to move that thing like 8 spaces with 2 officer movements. Really good. Really good. Allows it to actually get those 2 attacks off with retrofitting, with the assault from retrofitting instead of having to exhaust retrofitting for the movement. Moving on to our unique figures, we've got Iden, Versio, and Dio, and these guys, these 2 were really good. Honestly, actually really balanced. Like, they didn't win a ton of games, but they didn't win a ton, but they kept in that nice pocket of, you know, 45 to 55 that we like to see, and they got a lot of play. I think Iden's going to be really great in a trooper list that needs like a hard hitter to really push through damage onto a single target. She is super strong with that, and if you combine her with Krennic, she hits even harder, but she's just super versatile. And then a lot of cool tricks we were seeing. Josh Songer was doing like that command card that any figure can play, and you push, it lets you push another figure a certain number of spaces. So what they would do is Dio would play one of those command cards to move Iden, and then because of attached, Dio gets to tag along and get basically free movement. So really cool with that. A lot of cool stuff she can do. Agent Callus, so he is also doing great. He hits hard. He is more of a close range, mid-range brawler. He is a brawler. Definitely hits hard if he can, especially if he can focus himself. And then his command card was awesome. We saw a lot of people playing the command card to basically pull somebody out and smack them. And yeah, and seeing a lot of use with like what do you call it, strain lists like Riot Troopers, that the Fulcrum ability that has both players drawing a card. We saw players trying to take advantage of that with strain lists in Empire. So if you can empty your opponent's deck quickly with Thrawn and Riot Troopers, by turn 3 or 4, you're hoping to turn that two-sided draw into a one-sided draw for yourself, because your opponent's deck is empty, of course. A very balanced performance, perfectly balanced. We didn't have to change them at all. And finally, we talked about General's ranks. Oh, Krennic's card got an update, and Krennic still doing okay, but his card was doing awesome. Pretty much from the data I saw, if you resolved Krennic's card, you had a very good chance of winning that game. So that card doing great. Hopefully that gets approved. Let's move on to Rebels. So Cassian doing great. He's just kind of a solid midpoint figure, midpoint cost figure at 6. Great sniper, great support figure, kind of that hybrid support. Yes, he does fill the niche of Khotun really well, and yes, we realize that Khotun's a bit out of a job, although it's not like anybody was hiring her before Cassian came along. So I'm sure we'll see Khotun getting her own niche remade, or something similar, but also not just doing what Khotun does, because that it will be alright ability did get used, and people were using it to get free attacks. They were using it to finish off their own damage figures in order to kill the opponent's figure before they got activated. Used in conjunction with Pathfinders, with reinforcements to give him really some nice free attacks. Turn your Pathfinder's blue-green attack into a Cassian attack that's blue-blue-green with a power token. That's a nice upgrade for just a 3-point swing. K2 seeing a ton of play, but really struggling in the early seasons, the early part of the playtesting period, to get wins, and his win rate was really low. So we upgraded Vague and convinced. Oh no, sorry, Cassian said I had to. So he gets surge tokens from that instead of So he gets damage tokens from that now instead of surge tokens, and he did see his win rate did go up. He's got 3 great traits like droid. Well, okay, 2 great traits for Rebels. Brawler and Spy are really good in Rebels. Droid's a little weird. There's not too much droid action going on in the Rebel faction, so that makes him a bit of an odd duck. But he also pairs well with leaders thanks to his ability. And he's a 5.3 dice figure that can often make ranged attacks by turn 2. And so he's got great surge abilities, great dice pool, really good defensive profile since the opponent can't spike damage with command cards or power tokens. So I think he's going to be a really solid figure. With that small change, I think it's going to help improve his damage output enough that he sees more play. And his command card's really good too. Although I think it's going to take some playing and practicing for people to really maximize it. Looking at the returning figures for Rebels, Davith, just a solid figure. He can do massive damage if he's focused and hidden, and if you can get him in and get a hit with him. And then with Vanish, his command card's so good because if you use Vanish and then play to the limit, you don't get the stun from to the limit because Vanish says you can't receive conditions. Unfortunately, it means you can't re-hide him, so that's kind of a bummer, but it's a cool combo. And he did see a lot of play in Jedi lists as this, the first really playable 6-point Jedi is a really good niche, although he's not alone in that, and we'll talk about that later. And then Mern we had to nerf a little bit because it turned out the Figurehead. No, not Figurehead. False Orders without an action was just too strong. And what happened was, against lists where that had a target, it was just so frustrating to play against for people. But if it wasn't, then she felt perfectly balanced. And so we saw her getting used with a lot of different figures. Rebel Sabs, a lot. Really good Rebel Sabs. A little bit with Maul, a little bit with Dengar and Zuckuss. I think she was the most played figure of the playtesting season. She just supports so many different lists, but also lists that you don't see a lot because she doesn't help queen pieces. She's all about helping the 2 dice figures, which are either, you know, cheap generics or sometimes knight pieces like Maul and Diala. Really good with Diala. But you know, queen pieces don't really have 2 dice. You don't ever see a queen piece that has only a 2 dice attack. So yeah. So once we remove that, anyway, we also changed the ruling so Figurehead could prevent any number of strain for each damage she took. So she's going to be a really good role player as like an answer to the strain list if they get out of hand, as well as being a really nice kind of, that's something we've been doing with Rebels, like with Yoda, making support pieces that aren't directly better than 3PO and Gideon, because really we don't want to make things that are better than them, but that go in a different direction and reward more variant list building. So moving on, Fury of Kashyyyk, that was another big card. That one ended up doing just okay in the beginning, actually kind of underperforming, but I think people were still, I think really Fury of Kashyyyk in its original design, you really wanted to just be playing Wookiee Warriors and Garkon with it, and I think people were trying it with Drokata and Chewbacca, and it wasn't performing as well as the ones that were running just spamming Wookiee Warriors. And we took a lot of feedback from that from people, and so in the final update we actually changed it so that instead of getting Pierce 2, you can get Pierce 1 if there's another friendly Wookiee within 2 spaces of the defender, and we actually allowed that to be applied to any elite Wookiee, so that opened it up to just Chewbacca actually, because Drokata is not an elite figure. She's actually a regular figure, the gray card, which is kind of weird. And we actually didn't even realize that. We just thought, well, okay, let's see. Hopefully it doesn't break Drokata. But luckily, we realized at the end that, oh yeah, it was pointed out to us that, oh yeah, this doesn't even work with Drokata. So, but yeah, I think this card is strong, but it's like the Wookiee Warriors are just so underpowered that it makes them good enough, and it works well enough with the other Wookiees. And I think it's going to be a fun list that we're going to see. And I think it's nice because it doesn't restrict your list building the way that a card like Spectre Cell does. We saw a lot of variety in the Wookiee lists that were played. We saw some lists that were all Wookiees, and we saw some lists that were just like 1 or 2 or maybe 3 Wookiee cards, deployment cards, and they all did pretty evenly well. Now for the recosts, for Rebels, we had Luke Skywalker down to 10 points, and this one stirred up quite a bit of debate thanks to Chris talking about it in the Science Finest, whether, you know, is Luke at 10, like, is he just efficient, or should he be more Queen PC, kind of like Vader is, like this juggernaut, you know, piece that can just cut through people, rather than he's currently more of a finesse piece where you need to really choose your moment with him. And that's where he's at right now, is like he's at 10 points, he's the same cost as Han. He has a much higher ceiling in my opinion than Han. Like he can just go nuts and do 4 attacks if you've got like some good movement cards and Son of Skywalker and Pummel. But he's also got, you know, a little bit of a lower floor than Han. Or he can be a little harder to use and a little easier to get killed, because unlike Han, he can't just sit back and snipe from a distance. You gotta like put him in danger to get some value out of him. But when you do that, you're at least losing only 10 points instead of 11. And I think that extra point that you get from going down to 10 from 11 has opened up a lot of list building options with Luke. Easier to bring extra armor, channel the Force. Easier to upgrade one of your other Jedi if you're running him in an all Jedi list. You know, upgrade from Obi-Wan to Diala, or upgrade from, or maybe upgrade if you're having to run like Loku or Tress. You can upgrade that to Davith now, or Mara. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, I think Luke's in a really good spot. I have always wanted Luke to be at 10. I just thought, you know, this is a 10-point card. And the games I've watched this is the correct points cost is 10. Then we got a good old Biv to round things out, down from from 8 points to 7 points. And didn't see a ton of play, but the games he was played in, he did pretty well. Like, he was solid at 7. I think the best use for him is still in a scum list with, what is that card called? That 1-point card, Prey on the Weak, since he's a hunter. And then you can actually like get better use of that out of that multi-fire, since he is still going to cost more than most other figures. Although that might even have made him that might have made that worse, because there's a lot of 7-point figures in ICP now, and he used to outcost them at 8. Now he's only going to be able to do that against 6 and less, which is going to be like Onar, who doesn't have something to pierce. So I don't know. Maybe he doesn't need that crutch anymore now that he is at 7, because I haven't seen anybody running it on him, but I've seen him doing pretty decently as far as his win rate. So that is the Rebel faction. Let's talk about the deployment card, the neutral deployment card, and then we'll go over the command cards, and then we will wrap it up. So neutral card, Mara Jade, the card everyone was like really impressed by and a little bit freaked out by when it first got spoiled. 0 changes were made to Mara Jade through the season. She is the same. Actually, wait, I will rephrase that. 0 power level changes. We did errata fast learner. It was just too confusing for people to see that like she can attack at range 3, but not really. And we just realized that it was too much trouble for this one command card combo with arcing shot. So we went the route of Aphra and just said accept arcing shot. You can play any command card for other figures except arcing shot, and that made it a lot cleaner, I think. But yeah, she got a ton of play as well in Season 5. I think she was the second most played figure after Mern. And she was like 50% win rate like the whole time or less. So we didn't see the kind of big combos breaking the game that a lot of people were predicting. Her attack strength wasn't as big of an issue as a lot of people were predicting. And again, a lot of that was because of what we said was, you know, she's speed 5, but she is still a regular melee figure. She doesn't have reach. She doesn't have, you know, a saber throw or anything like that to extend her reach, other than it used to be arcing shot. But you know what? Nobody played her with arcing shot. So she basically runs in there. She slashes for like 5 or 6 damage. If she can play a card to get an extra attack, she'll do another 6 damage, so she might kill something, and then she just dies. 11 health, white die, no defense buffs. Unless she is in Scum, which was probably the faction we saw her the least in, where she can play on the Lamb, she just dies pretty quick. Although, I mean, I guess in Guardian, so in Rebel she's Guardian, she has Iron Will, and that helped a lot. She did really good in Empire, especially with the Grand Inquisitor. I think Grand Inky has had the highest win rate he's ever had. He's never been a good figure, even after the recost down to 7. His attack is always so weird. But with Mara being able to guarantee or make it easier to play hunter cards in that list, as well as force user cards, that's been really good. Really great with Luke, obviously, being able to play Son of Skywalker. But although honestly, if you're playing Son of Skywalker on Mara instead of Luke, you're not quite as happy, but it's better than having it stuck dead in your hand. A little bit of play with Chewie at the end of the playtest period, but nothing ever like broke Mara where it was like, whoa, this is way too strong. Because really, if you're playing a bunch of command cards with Mara, then she's just a beat stick that has a regular attack. She's not generating extra attacks on her own, or extra damage on her own. She is proportionally strong to the number of command cards you pump into her. And so, Mara, very good, very solid role player. And she plays well with a lot of different unique figures, which is really what we wanted. So Mara ended up being good, but not broken. Alright, rounding out, let's talk about the command cards, that the neutral command cards. So Overwhelming Impact saw a lot of play with Wookiees and heavy weapons, but based on the data we got, wasn't like leading to a lot of game wins for the players. It actually had a less than 50% win rate. So which was telling us that like it was probably really strong against like the heavy defensive queen pieces, but otherwise just 2 points for +1 damage and +1 surge is about average for a command card. Apex Predator, unfortunately the win rate got pulled down by the Wampa's performance in the early part of the season, but I think it's still a very solid card, and I think the games I saw it played in, it did a lot of work, and I think it's going to be a good 3-point card for creatures moving forward to kind of build a creature deck around to be rewarded with. Feint was really solid, actually. It was a really good performer. Surprisingly versatile. I saw it get a lot of kills on people just by dealing +1 damage by knocking out a triple or double block and spending a single hit to do that. And of course it was amazing when the opponent rolled a dodge and you just got to like cancel 2 damage to put the rest of the damage of the attack through. And just really easy to fit into a list at one point, and I think the card is really a staple for brawlers. Although if you ask some brawler players like Jake, you know, he doesn't even want to run it in his list. So definitely a card that I think if you hate the dodge, if you hate getting dodged, you're going to want to run Feint in your list if you're playing brawlers. But otherwise, I think it's an optional card, which is really good. Rapid Recalibration, it just performed well. I think there's going to be a lot more droid lists. We're seeing a lot more, especially in Scum. Especially, I think Forlom is positioned really well to make a comeback. We already know that he's got some really neat combos with him and Beast Tamer to get free movement by making him a creature, and then you load him up with like a power token from a Lothcat and a focus, and then having cards like this is going to be really good. I didn't see a huge uptick in IG88 performance based on this card, neither with IG11, so I think this card is really going to be the best for the mid-tier droids, and I think IG88 is just going to still be good because he's a hunter. He's already got a ton of hunter cards anyway. Finally, for the new cards, Rest in Peace. This card didn't see a ton of play, although I think if you're watching this earlier in the video, there is a moment where somebody played Rest in Peace against a Jedi player that had just channeled the Force for knowledge and defense, which was awesome. And I think it's the fact that it draws a card for free, it replaces itself. It's really not punishing at all. I think it's just we haven't seen players really reacting yet to the graveyard shenanigans. Oh, sorry, not graveyard, the discard pile of shenanigans that are in the game. But I think it's honestly like it's a good card to include if you don't want to deal with stuff like if you're not running discard shenanigans and you don't want to deal with it, or you want to be able to stop it for a turn. I think it's still really good. And finally, Assassinate got unnerfed as a test, so we were playtesting that. Did really well as a card. However, what we didn't see was hunters like having a huge dominant win rate because of it. It was just like if you drew and played Assassinate, your win rate went up from like 50% to 59%, which is still really good. But I don't personally think it's broken in terms of a game balance. I think it is annoying to just have to deal with it because we did see a lot of Assassinate plus one other card gets the kill, and that's annoying to deal with. Like a full health figure dies because of that. I think it's annoying to deal with, and I think a lot of players feel that way. But because we felt like based on what we were seeing, it wasn't like inherently unbalancing or broken to the meta, we are going to be keeping it in. So it's going to be on the community vote. So if you have strong feelings about Assassinate, either that it should be in the game in its original form and hunters need it, or if you feel like you know, the first nerf that IC put out for it in season 1 of you can only play Assassinate as your only card during an attack. Make sure you go and vote, and I'm going to put the link to that in the description of the video so you guys can all click on that and go vote after you watch this. And yeah, so that was season 5 kind of in a nutshell. I hope you guys enjoyed. I again apologize, I haven't been making a lot of videos. I was able to kind of get away and make this one real quickly. But let me know what you guys think about season 5. If you played it, what you think about it. If you have not played it but have been looking at the cards, let me know what you guys think. And we will be covering all the tournaments that are going to be happening in the approved play season, which is happening from April through July, I think. And July is going to be season 6. So anyway, yep, community vote, that's going to be open through the first 2 weeks of April. Make sure you check that out, guys, and I will catch you later. Bye.